Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I decided to do this pre-introduction. It's kind of an epic video. And so Trump's position on Gaza is so ridiculous, and his popularity has risen, which is so ridiculous. And there's so much going on here. And I expose all the narratives and give the most likely scenario and narrative, which blows up any of these, official stories that's being given by Trump and the mainstream media and Israel and Netanyahu and all these other people. And then I decide to ask Google's YouTube bot, Gemini. And Gemini refused to respond a couple of times. I hit a wall with Gemini where it just said, I can't answer you right now. I can't answer that, right? And Gemini also, gave me all the pieces to what I was arguing at different times, admitted to things or implied that this was a possibility, all these things that I'm saying here. Because what I'm saying is logical and practical. I'm talking about the, stuff to do with Hamas and, their motivations and what the most logical scenario of what's going on here based in all these various factors, right? It's speculation on my part, and I'm not trying to say I have the factual story because I couldn't prove it factually. I mean, I guess I could in some ways, but I'm not, it's not necessary to do that. This is just my speculative story, which so many of us believe, and it makes Trump into a complete POS, a horrible person, and a bad leader, and a fraud, and a hypocrite, and all of these things, right? He's a kneepads. Like we used to call Kamala kneepads Harris, and all the Trumpers love that because of her servicing that guy so she could start her career. Well, Trump is on his knees for Israel and the big banks and Wall Street, and we've seen this over and over again. So this is Donald Kneepads Trump, and this is his tale. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So Trump has high popularity, and he just said more abhorrent things about Palestinian people and all of it. So I got 3 clips to show you, and I want to focus mostly on that. What a disaster it is, how effed it up it is, and how the comments I'm getting from Trumpers is far from loving the guy, even though there's the popularity and the danger of the popularity. And it's kind of funny. Like it's not funny for the Palestinian people and Iran and, eventually all of us. Like we're all effed by Trump, but, but we're effed anyway. So I'll get into that. But I want to talk about the aura that comes with a migraine. Like I just talked about this in a recent video, how I get these once every year or 2 years, they're so infrequent. But it is a weird thing that the human body does. And it's not the weirdest thing the human body does. When you think about all these, Parkinson's and all these types of things, the various diseases that are out there, or strokes or any number of things. And so, I was talking about this in like I said, a very recent video, but and this as well, both the aura and the fact that I had I fell off a zip line when I was in high school. Like it was just a really stupid thing. Like just, there's no way that it was a completely unsafe zip line me and my buddy built. And I knew it, and we were going anyway, and we should have been. Like one of us was going to fall. It was like one of those things. But after that, it was my first time getting a migraine. And I don't know, like I had a concussion, but my dad said he got an aura. And my dad and my son both get migraines. People in my family do, so it's not a unusual thing. So it's a little hard to say whether I don't think the knock on my head made it better. But I was a freshman in high school, and maybe 3 months after the concussion, maybe, I don't know, sometime that next year, I was walking down the hall, and we had those, like, the high school with their, high schools are really just prisons, right? You're kind of a prisoner, and they're shaped like prisons, and there's just, there's a prison element to it, right? You can drive by a school, and they can easily convert it into like a pretty, it's like this thing, especially now with the lockdowns. And they have these horrible fluorescent lights in the hallways, and back in the, I graduated in 1982, so this is the 80s. And all of a sudden, my eyes didn't work right. Like I couldn't see. And that's what an aura is. But I didn't feel right. And it was pretty bad the first time. Like I was like blinded. You know how when you look into a light, you look into a lamp or a light, or I guess even the sun or something like that. Of course, it's not recommended. But, and then you turn away and there's a spot there. It like the light has left a reflection in your eyes and you see that dot. You could be looking at something completely dark and there's a light, like a light there, whatever. I don't know what that phenomenon's called, but it's like that. But they're little squiggly little lines, like little zigzaggy lines that are on kind of an angle, and they're flashing. And wherever you look, when I close my eyes, I can see it. And it was the weirdest thing for me, and I didn't feel right. Like I felt weird, and like I didn't know what to do. And I was stumbling. I didn't kind of know where I was. I was disoriented, and like I'm a 14-year-old kid, so I have no idea. I don't know what a migraine is. My dad got really bad headaches, and I don't know. And he said he got these aura things, but he didn't say it wouldn't come out for like 10 years. Like he didn't know this is what I was experiencing, and we didn't communicate. I didn't talk with my family, my parents, and they were really incompetent. And so I I was walking. I couldn't see right. Like I was just my brain. It's a brain thing. It's not like your eye has anything to do with your eyes. Because like we said, when I close my eyes, you can still see it. It's your brain is telling you you're seeing these things. It's affecting your visual field, and it's usually in one eye. And I went to the nurse, and I didn't feel good. I think I was a little bit nauseous, and like I didn't know what to do, like because I was like, and the nurse, like I don't know, like they didn't. I mean, they had no idea what's going on, and kids coming in all the time, and I said like I need to go home, and so my mom came to pick me up, and I went to where the front door was of the school, and I just laid down on the floor, like by the door, like I was like dizzy, and I was disoriented, which is a complete like social nightmare. Like it was pretty judgmental when I went to school. I don't know how bad it is now. It's different, of course, generationally. But this would have been social suicide for me just to lay down there. Or people might have been really concerned that I was like dying or something. But I just laid down like in the middle of the floor. And, I went home. My mom was worried all the time. Like my mom was a hypochondriac, and she kind of F's me up like with allergies. I talked about this in my those videos I made, and I'm not really focused on the whatever that is, the Rumble stuff. But I think I might try to put those videos up as things loosen up more on my Apocalypse Now channel. I have 5 of them about my healthcare stuff, and I have a few new things that I'm using even now that and whatever. So but my mom just did a bunch of stuff allergy-wise, took me to doctors, and I had this operation, and my adenoids, and just all this stuff, or whatever it was. It was like it caused me to have mono. Like she did damage to me based in her hypochondria. But when I had real medical issues, like she would just freeze. It's like wouldn't attack. Like they didn't deal with my migraines. Like I'm just saying, I'm seeing lights, and then the light goes away, then the vision clears up, and then the pain sets in. And the pain was excruciating. It was like nothing I ever felt. And I started smoking pot back then. That had an effect on it, because it's like it's opening up of the brain cells and then them contracting really quickly. So your not your blood cells, not brain cells. Your blood cells open up, and then there can be tension in the jaw. There's all these things with the migraines, but it has to do with contracting and expanding of your cells, whatever that is. And, so if you go from one extreme to another. So I exercised quite a bit. I was an athlete, and you get, bursts of adrenaline. And so it could be any, there's all these factors in it. But my parents, didn't, it took a while before I understood that I was having migraines. And there was this thing called an aura. I just looked it up here. So it says here, the AI overview. The exact cause of a migraine's aura is not fully understood. My initial reaction to what I'm doing with the AI, this is just happening. I didn't go to the AI. It just, that's what Google uses now. Is it seems kind of good. Like some of the answers are better than their regular search engines. I think it's an improvement in their search engines. As much as people are concerned about it, as much as those concerns are justified, my initial reaction is like the answers I'm getting from, and I'm gonna try to use it on my. They have the Apple thing. I try that one, but the Siri just sucks. It's like worthless, and a lot of the search engines have been bad. If they can put these filters in the AI, then that's completely fucked. But like they did with if they don't recommend what you want. But anyway, the exact cause of migraine aura is not fully understood, which is how they don't know. Like this is as much as they say that they've got a hold on things, like they don't know what causes you to go to sleep. That moment of sleep where the moment where you're awake one moment and sleep the next. They can't tell you what happens there. But it's believed to be related to a temporary disruption in the brain activity called cortical spreading depression. CSD waves causes a wave of electrochemical changes in the brain. There's no brain chemistry like they say, so that's suspect. That spreads from one area to the other. The wave can affect the areas of the brain not that this, when they say, it changes your brain chemistry, it changes your body chemistry. Like your blood's flowing through your brain to the other parts of your body. So if there's any chemistry, it's affecting your whole body, right? There's no such thing as brain chemistry. Other than the fact that there's things in your brain that are in other parts of your body. But anyway, causes a wave of electrical and chemical changes in the brain that spreads from one area to the other. The wave can affect the areas of the brain that control vision, sensation, and other functions, leading to symptoms of migraine aura, such as visual disturbances, flashing lights, blind spots, shimmering lights, numbness and tingling in the face, arms, and legs, which I get that. I get that more than I should. Like I feel those like weird things like that. Confusion or difficulty speaking, difficulty with movement or coordination. Some other factors may trigger CSD, increase the risk of migraine aura, include stress, hormonal changes, certain foods and drinks, caffeine, chocolate, cheese, bright lights, loud noises, changes in temperature, genetic predisposition. But it's a weird thing. Like it's just, it's like I'm glitching out. Like it's some kind of, I'm still functioning. And so it happened to me yesterday. And often, too, it can be triggered by like a nap or something. Or like I could be feeling really good, like in a meditation. And that would be like the opening up of the blood cells, right? Where there'd just be like oftentimes I'll just have like this moment where I'll feel like really like everything opening up. And then, there'll be a contraction of some sort, and then it goes the opposite way. And then I get a migraine. So, as a kid, that would happen. When I first had migraines, I always had the aura. And then the pain would set in. And it wasn't just the pain. It was like, just feeling, it's a lack of serotonin, right? And then it's changed over the years. And so the aura disappeared. I went for a number of years where I never got the aura at all. Like, so this is, kind of bodily changes as I've gotten older and things of, whatever, meditation things and there's a genetic, like a evolution in the Sajmark system, which I've definitely experienced. Like I'm a better person, like in terms of, like I'm just, better. Like less of an asshole, kind of stuff. And I'm happier and I'm just, better balanced. I'm better to deal with things, just all these things. But as you get older, you're more sensitive and you have, more difficulty dealing with like stimulation and things. So, there's all these factors. But the aura has disappeared. And so I had this aura yesterday. And I was pressing myself to finish the Super Bowl video. And then I went outside, did a bunch of farm work. It was around 3 o'clock. And my son actually was doing some things we asked. And the dogs are with me. And there's some things I'd been waiting to do. And all of a sudden I was able to do them. Like I saw them and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to do that. And I wanted to do it while the winter was here. And so I was doing these things. And I was waiting for my wife to come home from work. I was going to make tacos. And I really didn't, I feel weird during the day, I guess, a little bit off. And I started watching TV. There's this show called The Spy. Sacha Baron Cohen. It's which I want to talk to about later. As that's a whatever it is, but he's a Mossad spy, and I felt tired, and so I started to take a nap, and I woke up, and we have this farm truck, and the exhaust on the farm truck is like you can smell it in the cab, and it's like making it that I can't drive the thing, and so I have this mechanic that you have to. It takes months to get an appointment. He's very thorough and very cheap. And there's a whole thing they do now. It's like a really busy shop. And his wife runs the front desk. And like they've, used to be very, in a very personal kind of, it's like a not known great place, where the guy doesn't overcharge you and he's really thorough. But the guy calls you, he calls the person with the vehicle. And the last time we talked, he talked for 25 minutes about my truck. and that's part of the reason like they're busy there because he's so thorough and whatever. And I think he thinks I'm more of a car guy or a truck guy. People are like, what does it got in it? 305, 350? I'm like, I don't fucking, I don't want. I should know, but I don't because I've been told. But I'm not a truck vehicle person, but people must think I am, right? Was in India, I think they thought I was Vin Diesel. Because every time I got in an auto rickshaw, they take me on this death ride like I was like I had a need for speed and I fucking don't, right? But this guy loves my truck on top of it. But he just talks forever. And like he just has a need to talk about things that do with cars in your car. And we was on the phone for 20 minutes. So I was taking a nap and I wake up and the guy's telling me we already had a 25-minute talk a week ago. Like he's had my truck for like 2 weeks now. Like I forget that it was there, right? My son was going to use it to move some wood. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's gone. It's at the shop. And when I drove it there, the gas was so bad. And I talked to them about it before, but he didn't really understand. But he brought it into his shop and it smelled the whole shop up. And it's running rich. It's got a carburetor. It's a 1986, Chevy truck, right? But it's in really good shape. The guy said like if I want to sell it, he would buy it, right? It's like one of those things. But it's like great for our farming. And so the guy's talking to me, and I wake up and I'm like, I think I'm getting an aura, and and I'm having trouble focusing. Like I just woke up from a nap, and this guy's telling me shit and talking about things, and he's saying AC wires, which I think are alternator wires, but I was like, what are you talking about, bro? I don't understand you. Like I'd say that, but I'm just, yeah, all right, yeah, like this kind of thing. And and he was just keeping me updated. And it went on for about 6 or 7 minutes. I got up and I had a slight aura, and it just got worse. And so I ended up feeling kind of good, like in my head I didn't feel like bad, and I was in a good meditative state. And I went back and I meditated. I'm just sitting there on the couch in front of the TV, and I had really good meditation. And like it's I'm in this kind of etheric, it's like almost like a drug-induced state. I'm just kind of out of it. And I started to, meditate, and then I fell back to sleep. And then I got up, and I was relaxing my jaw so I didn't get a bad migraine because that, is a part of it. And I was just doing things I knew I had to do to avoid the migraine. And it went on, the aura came and went, and I started cooking dinner. And, I was kind of like not feeling great, but I, forced my way through it. And the aura came and went for like an hour and a half. I've never experienced anything like it. Usually about 10 minutes. And then I felt like slightly migraine-y the rest of the night, but just barely. Like I mostly felt kind of good. And I was thinking, this what a weird fucking thing. Like that, would mess up your vision. And they don't, and I knew that they don't really know what's going on. There's so many things that the allopathic medicine, they don't have any fucking idea why these things happen, right? It's almost like you're having a stroke. But like it's the weirdest thing that your brain is like capable of that kind of misfunction. And again, like I don't get them that much. Like I still get the migraines, but without the aura. And I get those fairly frequently, but most of them are mild. Over the years, like I can do things with them. And it involves nausea, and mostly it's just the lack of serotonin. It's like feeling like totally unmotivated to do anything, even like watch TV. Like nothing appeals. Like everything will suck worse. Whether I eat something or I watch something or anything that I do is going to be less enjoyable when I have a migraine. Like it just is. And then, it used to be I could sleep it off, but sometimes now when I fall asleep, they get worse. So it's like, these things. And I'm looking, what a weird fucking thing, Like what a weird thing to have in your body. And it's not the weirdest thing. It's not the worst thing. But like the human body is like kind of fucked. Like, and I don't know if it's just because of all the unnatural things and the chemicals and, we all have to deal with the the poisons that we're being given, the toxins, and then the other unnatural things like, having artificial light and blue light in the computer screens and Wi-Fi and electricity in our houses, and there's those factors, right, which contribute to cancers and all these types of things, the heart disease. Like we're living longer lives than 1,000 years ago, couple hundred years ago. But there's all these weird, glitchy out kind of things. Anyways, I just thought I would open up with that, and then let's go to the Trump stuff. Okay, so let's start here. This has happened.
Okay. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Good to see you. The latest CBS poll has your approval ratings at an all-time high, despite all these controversial subjects and executive orders that you're doing. Want to get your thoughts on that, how you've really connected to mainstream America.
Yeah, I have high approval ratings because I'm using common sense, whether it's...
Okay. See, Trump is great at selling himself. And so I want to say let me start off by saying this. I noticed there's a bunch of comments from Trumpers. Now, I don't get as many Trumpers here because they don't want to hear what I have to say, which is fine. Because they want to have their little bullshit hopium thing, whatever, that's fine. It's just better for both of us. So, good. But I got these comments, and you guys can see them from my last video, that, they were saying things like, well, you'd rather have Biden or Kamala Harris? Well, he's not as bad as the last guy, right? Instead of saying he was like the greatest guy ever, and how dare I, they're now saying, they get a sense with this Gaza stuff and some of these other things, you'd rather have somebody else. And so that's when it becomes that kind of support or approval, it's out of desperation and wishful thinking, right? Again, these are just a random bunch of comments that I got where I saw like there's 4 or 5 comments from Trumpers to my video about, well, he's better than the Democrats, these kind of things. Silly little points of view. Not the kind of things you would hear before. And that's how it was when Trump's first term. And then, he was doing better. The country was doing better. And when the country's doing great, then the people are going to feel, like Trump said, success breeds happiness and bringing people together. If all of a sudden things are better, the prices go down. And he might do it artificially. Like it might be a short-term gain. But no one gives a shit about that. People don't think about the long term. They don't think about the future. They don't think about their kids or grandkids or future versions of themselves. People just want immediate gratification. I mean, Americans are the worst at this. I think, at least probably the worst. I mean, in terms of, a large country, they're the worst. We just expect things to be great right now. And if they're not great, why aren't they great? Whose fault is it? All these types of things, right? So Americans have a different attitude. Like I was talking about my truck guy, right? My mechanic. Like there's just so much about cars. Like I can do minor repairs. I kind of get things. I kind of know what's wrong with the truck, kind of whatever cars. I mean, I'm okay with it. But I don't want to be a master mechanic. I might have to be at some point. I just don't have it in me. Like I'm not meticulous enough and careful enough, and I have some abilities in that area, but I'm not. I'm pretty remedial. And like with most of those problems, like a problem with your, like your air conditioning unit outside, or with your stove or something, or any kind of issues you might have with your devices, you don't need the people to come in and explain in detail what they did and why they're doing it. Like it's just, I mean, in terms of, you just want it fixed. And that's how most people think about all these problems. They know there's a problem, and they want to have confidence in the guy who's fixing it. And they want to believe that they have somebody in Trump to do that. And they want to think that the things he's doing are going to have good results, and they have no idea. They're not thorough. They're not deep thinkers about this stuff, And I don't care about it. Like, I do it for this job. I'll do more research just so I know what I'm talking about, because I have a sense of it, and I'm usually my sense of it's right, but I have to know a little bit about it, right? And so, the majority of people just want to hear, okay, I got this, and I'm going to take care of it. And most people know that politicians are completely fucked, and they've been getting screwed over by politicians. And so some guy comes in as an outsider and says he's going to do things different. And they kind of want to remember the good times when he was president, not what he did with COVID, not his failure on Operation Warp Speed. I mean, even after the last Trump presidency, that's what the QBs were saying, what people are saying to me now. Well, at least he's better than Hillary. What do you want, Hillary? These things, right? Because in the beginning, he was, the second coming of Jesus. And then it was like, well, at least he's better than the Democrats, right? This kind of thing. And so, which is, kind of funny and all these things. But it's very disturbing, the things that he's doing, because he doesn't know what he's doing. He already admitted that when he was with Joe Rogan. And he's not a very in-depth thinker. Like, he just doesn't care about things. And he's very impulsive. And he's run companies into the ground. I mean, he's in debt, made bad decisions, blames everybody else, never takes personal accountability. So he's not a thorough person. He's not a competent person. He's not a guy who really does get things done. He's good at making himself look good or minimizing how bad he looks. His way of talking, his ability to convince people that he's got this. Like, that's his, his signature hallmark ability to convince people, oh, I got this. Don't worry about it. I got you. And make them believe it. Make him believe he's going to take care of them. And he might turn on them immediately. But to the people walking out of the meeting, they think like when what's her name? That the senator from Dianne Feinstein was talking about gun control. She thought Trump was totally going to give her everything she wanted. She walked out of that meeting with these other people thinking Trump was completely on board. And then he turned on him. Of course, he always does. He does these things. He makes it sound like he's with you, and you believe it. You believe he's with you, and then he stabs you in the back or just turns it because, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's good at doing that. Like, he's good at making people feel heard.
Getting men out of women's sports. I mean, have you seen what goes on with the boxers and with the weightlifters? And
of course, things like that are things that people wanted. The majority of people didn't want to admit, like some Democrats didn't want to admit, but I said, just let it happen. There was these liberal people who were watching their daughters get manhandled and watching their potential daughters, their daughters who were athletes, get manhandled. It's the other daughters, they started, this is pretty fucked up, but we don't want to appear homophobic or transphobic, so we're not going to say anything. But deep down, they're glad that that thing's over. I mean, majority of people know that thing's fucked up, where biological men are allowed to compete with women. It's like silly that this thing would even be allowed. But the liberals and the people who don't want to be accused of being prejudicial, or transphobic. I mean, that's, but I mean, that, of course they're happy with that, right?
the swimmers and everything, it's so ridiculous. And I think it's a 90% issue. And, the amazing thing, the Democrats are still fighting for it. It's crazy. It's crazy. I think we should go to Congress also, have that cemented and, make it indelible. But it's, to me, it's all common sense. Who wants an open border where prisons are dumped into our country, where prisoners are led into our country, many of whom are murderers, many of whom murdered far more than one person, and they're now roaming our country. Who wants
mass murderers, you mean?
that? I mean, it's terrible. Steve, I'd like you to say a couple.
They're eating the dogs. Remember how they're eating the dogs? Have you stopped them eating the fucking dogs? That's what I know, Trump. They're no longer eating the dogs.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
So also he's stopped them from minting pennies, which is a good idea. Like pennies are just worthless. Like, I mean, most of the time people are not using cash. I mean, cash is a thing of the past. And pennies, I mean, like even nickels. I mean, it's become, the inflation's so bad. They're like, I used to be able to buy shit with pennies. I get like a piece of bubble gum for a penny. Sometimes like maybe even two. You could actually, things cost 1 cent. Like if I had a penny, I could go to the drugstore where this guy had candy and I could buy shit, right? I could like buy something with a penny. Like that doesn't exist anymore. And even with a nickel, so I mean, anyways. So these are things like that he's doing that's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like he does have some common sense things that he's doing. And so it's a deception because he's doing things that are good, but also, like I said, he's taking a sledgehammer to the government and, his whole criteria, and I was saying this to my wife because she was talking to a Trumper about, and I thought that the Israel thing is a good idea. I mean, the Trumpers just believe whatever he says, right? And, there's a delicate balance, and that's why things are done a certain way. And Trump's like completely unaware of it, and he just wants to come in and dominate and do these things. And there's these convenient truthers, people who, they're kind of truthers when it's something like it's about Democrats or it's about something that they're not into. They pretend to be truthers, but they're not truthers to something like Trump or something that they believe in, right? Something that, is something that they hang their hat on, whether it be, if they're fans of sports, that sports isn't rigged, or, they're not open to the corruption ideas in certain areas of their life. And they think whatever Trump is doing is great. And Trump's whole criteria is whether he fires somebody in the federal government is whether they like him or not, right? Like Trump would think I'm doing a bad job here, but I think I do an excellent job. And so do the viewers who sort of get what I do here. But he would think I was, like, if he could fire me, he would, right? Because, what I'm saying about him. And so his view of me would be based in my view of him. But if he heard the videos where I like him or I talk about him in a positive way, he'd think I was great. The videos where I talk about how, like, the good things that Trump does. And if he just heard that, he thinks my videos were great. But if he heard the ones where I'm criticizing him, then he would, I mean, not just the stuff about Trump, but the other stuff. Like if he heard that I had a positive opinion of him, then he would listen to the other parts of my video, go, oh, this guy's great, But then he'll hear me criticize him. He's like, oh, this guy's horrible, because this is what Trump does. Which of course criticism does make people think that way, but Trump is on the high end of things. And he will fire people who are doing a good job because they don't like him. And people who are smart and can see through his bullshit, are necessary in the government because you need people who are not going to drink the Kool-Aid. And he wants to replace all the federal job people with Trumpers. And Trumpers are not high-functioning people. And if they buy into his bullshit and they think what he's going to do is okay and there's going to be no pushback and there's going to be no checks and balances, and they green stamp this guy, it's going to be a fucking, quick end to our country. I mean, it just will. Anybody being green stamped, the checks and balances are there to make sure that, like, dumbass shit isn't done. But when everyone drinks the Kool-Aid, that brings things down. Like, you need, people who will give some pushback, right? Or at least just ask the tough questions before you charge in and do the shit that you can't be undone. And so Trump is in a dangerous position where the Republican Party is, basically pandering to him. The liberals and the liberal media and the Democrats have been completely denuded, and they can do nothing. And now with his popularity, he's going to go full Trump. And he doesn't have any reason not to because he's going to die soon. He's not running for re-election. So he has 4 years to go full Trump, and it's really 2 years. So he's going to push everything. And then, let the smokes, let the dust settle where it is. And it's, and most likely it's going to end up in World War III, amongst other issues. Like it's going to be the end of America, which is already, the divine mandate. Like he's doing God's work because, America coming down is backed by God. It's backed by the divine forces because America is just going in the wrong fucking direction so badly that it can't, and it's just time, like it's just the right time. And so there's a lot going on here. Let's go back to this thing.
Words about it.
Yes, well, as you know, Mr. President, since you issued your day one executive orders, border crossings are down approximately 95%. You talk to agents on the line, in their entire careers, they've never seen crossing days as low as what they're experiencing right now. The cartels, in fact, are enormously frustrated because they've never seen a clampdown like this before.
How do you know? Well, tell me how you know that information. Are you on the speed dial with one of the cartel guys? Like this guy.
For in American history. There are people who were working at Border Patrol back when it was INS in the 80s and 90s. They've never seen a day like this. That's because you've mobilized the 10th Mounted Division, the Marines, the entire U.S. military. They're erecting physical miles of barrier, temporary and ultimately permanent, every single day. You have all of your border agents pushed to the front line. They're not doing the humanitarian processing, quote unquote, that Biden was.
Yeah, who needs that humanitarian bullshit, right? The thing about it is, there are people who are Republicans who have illegals working for them in some capacity. And illegal labor, illegal immigrant labor, is a big part of America. It's a big part of keeping price down. If they have to pay American employees and all the things that go with it, it's not just the pay is less, but it's also, Social Security. It's also, all the other stuff that you have to pay legitimate employees. It costs more, healthcare, whatever it might be, all these things that go with it, right? All these mandatory things that you have to pay for employees that you don't have to pay for an illegal. So, and there's jobs that Americans just won't do. And if these prices go up because of that, immigration-related costs, and they will because you have cheap labor. I'm talking about the people who are actually doing jobs that are keeping costs down, which is happening. Like people are having that all over the place, right? And there may be people who are like, oh, yeah, we got to get rid of these immigrants and these mass murderers and these criminals that Trump is talking about, because that makes sense, and I think we all see that. But if you get rid of a huge workforce, cheap labor, that's going to drive prices up. Like it just will. Everyone kind of understands that. And so Trump isn't, he's not meticulous enough just to get rid of the criminals. Like it's just, a lot of this is performative. So this guy is just rubber stamping. This is a Trump guy, right? And Trump can do no wrong. Like if they go over the cliff, they're going over the cliff together. Like they're all, they believe in what they're doing.
They're doing law enforcement and national security. They're interdicting weapons and drugs. They're interdicting violent, high-threat criminals. And the U.S. military is repatriating illegal immigrants at a pace and a scale that has never occurred before in American history. And those who are committing human trafficking and child trafficking are being prosecuted.
Okay, so there's going to be an outcome to all these things. Everything that Trump does, there's going to be an outcome. Like he's taking an action, and people like it. They're like, oh, thank God the guy's, this guy's finally doing something, right? It's like watching a boxing match where the guys are holding each other, and they're not throwing punches, and they're just grabbing. They're both tired. The fans are booing, right? They came to see guys beating the shit out of each other, and they're just kind of dancing. That's what politics has been. And then Trump comes in and starts throwing fucking, haymakers. And people are like, yeah, wait, we got some action going, right? It's good. He's doing some things. And, these concerns that people have are legitimate. And there is a legitimate concern to the open border and some of these other things. But if the prices don't go down, then people will turn on you. The masses, all these things. If there's disruption in services, World War III, whatever comes, there's going to be actions that are going to be reactions to Trump's using force. Trump is going full in, like not, he's pushing his chips in the middle of the table, where most politicians are so hesitant, they dip their toe, like the tip of their toe into the ocean. Trump's diving full into it and going full Trump, going with what he thinks is the right way. He's got a team of people supporting him, and he sucks. He's not thorough. He's not a winner. He's not a success. He's, a guy who takes these gambles and usually fails, like bankrupt 6 times, right? And so there'll be consequences, and they'll be whatever they are, right? And I, like everybody else, I hope it goes great. I know it's not, though. So we'll see it, and we'll see some of these things will be successful, but the ones that aren't, they'll be, disastrous. And that's the problem with Trump. Okay, so here's part 2 here. This is to do with Trump clarifying his ownership of Gaza plan.
I'm committed to buying and owning Gaza.
Okay, so, he either is really dumb, which is partially true, or he thinks American people are really dumb, which is 100% true. Because you can't buy Gaza. Like, who are you buying it from? The only people would be the Palestinian people, right? The Palestinian people own Gaza. So if you're going to buy it, you would have to ask them a price, the Palestinian people. And they don't have a leadership. Is it Hamas? They don't have a government, right? The people who live in Gaza Strip. It's the residents there. They're the ones who, if there's any ownership, it would be them. They don't have a government. And people just don't sell their country. He wants to buy Greenland from Denmark. That would be, okay, what's your price? What does Denmark want for Greenland? Like, how much are you going to pay Denmark for whatever resources and things that represents Greenland represents? How much does that value? What's the asking price, right? We're not talking about real estate. I mean, it's the most stupid thing you ever heard, right? You can't buy Gaza because there's no one to buy it from. You're not buying it from Israel. And if you did, you're going to give it back to them. So they would say, all right, whatever price that they gave you, I mean, they might give it to you so you can go and rebuild it. And then eventually you're going to leave. I mean, he's even going to say that, right? So it's a silly thing to say. Like, you can't buy Gaza, that you can't own it. Like, as American, he just says outlandish shit now, with the Panama Canal and Canada being, the another state of America. I mean, saying stuff is abhorrent, like to the Canadian people. They have a sovereign country. He just wants to annex them. This is colonialism. And there's lots of resources off the shore of Gaza, and it's potentially a beautiful, on the Mediterranean Ocean. I've said this before, right? So just a bizarre thing to say. It's audacious, and people love this about Trump. Yeah, I'm just going to own Gaza, right?
Committed to buying and owning Gaza. As far as us rebuilding it, we may give it to other states in the Middle East to build.
Which would be Israel. There's only one other state to give it to. You're not going to give it to the various other places around there, right? Egypt and Jordan and these others. He's not going to give it to one of these other countries. So if you're going to give it to other people, you're going to take ownership of Gaza, and then you're going to lease it to Israel. Like, what is your, it's going to be to Israel. Like, Israel wants this thing. This is their goal. They've hit. I mean, they've hit the jackpot with Trump. They had no idea that he was going to go this far. Like, Beatty was in heaven when when Trump started to say this bullshit, right? And so, like, this is really bad. You got to understand how bad this is. And I know there are a lot of Trumpers who are like, oh, wow, he's solving things. No, it's not a solution. There's 2 million people, 1.8 million people there. There's 4 cities, which I talked about, 4 cities with more than 2 million people in America. Houston, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Right? So there's 4 cities that are have a bigger population than Gaza. So think about all these big cities you drive through. And they're like less than 2 million people. There's a few cities that have around, Philadelphia and Phoenix that have like 1.7 million people, in the greater city area. Of course, there's more people in the suburbs, right? But 2 million people, it's a small area they already live in. And what do you do with 2 million people when every country around them says, we don't want them, right? See, when you think about demographics of people that aren't you, they all kind of look the same. Like when you think with the same thing with Americans, right? But you think about the difference between Southern Americans and Northern Americans, or city Americans and country Americans, right? Think about the difference between Boston, people from Boston, or people in New York. It's a 2-hour difference. Significant accents, significant cultural differences, very similar in some ways, but don't get along, right? People from Boston don't like people from New York, like there's a rivalry there. Like even from neighboring, you have towns that have rivals. You have your local town that has your little small city that has a rival, or within the city itself, 2 different high schools in a city, and there's a rivalry there, and people dislike each other, and you're very similar, even culturally. And so, when you see people from these other countries, oftentimes just think about the difference in the English language all across America. the various accents, the various, traditions, the various ways of expressing themselves. And so even though you think, all right, people from, Alabama are like people from Louisiana, well, there's differences, right? They might be, more similar than the people from New York. But these Palestinian people are different from other Arabs, and they would be a minority, and people would look at them as like, we don't want this many, legal immigrants in our country. Trump already knows about that shit, right? And these countries are saying, no, we don't want them. And you're taking this country away from these people. And they haven't done shit to deserve it, right? And so, you got to understand that anything you do to somebody can be done to you. Any action that you take, you're putting yourself in line for that future action to come back, and the same thing's going to happen to you. It's not that it may happen, it will happen. It's the reason why you do good things. Like, it's the reason why, if you don't want something done to you, because if you believe in God and you believe that there's some sort of accountability, then that has to be true. If you believe in some version of karma, that anything that you do will be done to you. And maybe not even in this life, but in the future, it's inevitable. And anything that America does to other countries is going to be done to America. It's going to happen. All these things that America's doing. And you're not going to like it, right? If someone said, we're going to take you guys' homes and send you to Mexico or send you to Canada, like all of you, or like some group of people. What if they took the people of Minnesota and said, we're going to send you guys all to Canada. We're taking your country and we're going to redo it. We're going to take your city and redo it, right? Minneapolis or something. And so, this is what Trump is proposing. And we've done a lot of bullshit, a lot of bullying and things. It's all going to come back to America at some point. It has to. Like all the things that we've enjoyed, we're going to suffer. All the things that we've taken advantage of, we're going to suffer those same things. We're going to be on the other side of the coin. And that's, like if you understand that, then this kind of an asshole, you would never want to be your president. And what he's doing to Gaza, other countries aren't going to have it. And so, like, he's just saying I'm going to own Greenland. I'm going to fucking own the Panama Canal. We're just going to bully our way. And, you can say it's a bluff, sure, but he's putting this idea out there. And, people aren't liking hearing that shit. They're sovereign. There's lots of small countries that America could just absorb. Well, let's make Europe part of America. They're small countries with 9 million people. These countries, some 6 million people. Denmark has like 5 million people. And he wants to take Greenland away that has like some hundreds of thousands of people. Iceland. You're just talking, this small group of people will just say, you guys will be part of the United States. You're creating an empire, right? I just want to own it.
Build sections of it. Other people may do it through.
Just listen to that again.
To other states in the Middle East to build sections of it. Other people may do it through our auspices, but we're committed to owning it, taking it, and making sure that Hamas doesn't move back. There's nothing to move back into. The place is
okay, so Hamas is still there. Like, we'll get into what Hamas really is because it's all a fucking lie, right? But he's saying that he wants to have various countries build parts of Gaza. Like, it's a small strip. It's like 20 miles long, right? I mean, it's not like it's Florida. It's 20 miles long. It's a very small area. And, if you had all these countries with some level of, who would own, like we'd own it, but we'd lease it to various countries. It's going to have to be all Israel. Israel wants it. Israel's the country that wants it. And these other countries don't want it because they know they would be dealing with Israel all the time. Like, they have their borders fortified. They don't want to push into Gaza, right? We're talking mostly about Egypt, which is right there on the border. And so the countries that border Gaza, I think, are Egypt and Jordan. Definitely Egypt. And so let's take a look at it here on the map. So the Gaza Strip is mostly surrounded by Israel with a small border here with Jordan. And then then a small area here. Very small. You see this right here. This is their border with Egypt. But it's mostly surrounded by Israel, right? And so, beautiful area. This is a beautiful, beautiful ocean here. And there's natural resources out here. Small little area in here. And it's surrounded by Israel. And so, Israel is like a little island of Palestinians. And Israel has, something like less than 1 million people. Whatever it was, right? Israel has a very small population, a little strip of land here. There's 12 million Jews worldwide. 1 million of them live in Israel, or some of those people in Israel aren't Jewish, and so I don't know what the percentage is. It's like 99% Jewish people, right? And so there's 2 million people here, and they ain't going to Syria, which is a frickin' mess right now. And the U.S. doesn't, they have a relationship with Russia. And Jordan they're not having it. They don't want 2 million people dumped here. And then in Egypt. So these would be the countries, right? Egypt, Jordan, and all these others. We know Iraq is a nightmare. And again, so you're going to airlift these people out. And Trump wants to build a city which the Google AI thing said would take maybe $1 trillion. It would take hundreds of $billions to build a city for 2 million people. And where do you build it? And it just wouldn't happen overnight. So you would have 2 million refugees are going to be kicked out of their homeland because Trump says he now owns it because he just said it. I mean, this is when a person says, I own it because I'm the king. Like, you can't say that shit. That's totally anti-democratic, and it's just a fucked up thing to say. We own Gaza now. Like, that's my solution. We're going to own it. We're going to rebuild it. Like now he's a king real estate developer. Like, it's completely fucked. Like, what he's saying is completely fucked. You got to understand this. Like, the arrogance here. It's the downside of, it's the worst of America, USA, where you think you're better than people because you happen to live in a country that has the best military and right now kind of the best economy, although that's fading. Like, you think that being America, you're special. You just happen to be born here, and you're not great. America isn't great. These things. You're not better than other people. You don't have a right. You don't have dominion over them, especially since your religion sucks, right? Your religion's a joke. All religions are bad, but this particular religion, especially the Old Testament. And so, like, this arrogance that you think you're better than people because you happen to be American, and we all think it. We all have that in us. We all think, hey, I'm an American. There's a natural, we've been told, and the rest of the world has been sort of sold this idea that Americans just are better. Like, because we're just we're the group. Like, it used to be the Romans, it used to be the Greeks, it used to be, Britain, it used to be, one time it was India, China, the Mongolian Empire with, when people dominate, there's just this sense that they're better, right? That they can, force you to become slaves and force you to just, submit to them. And there's just this element that those people who can dominate you are better, right? Just by their sheer force of the military and their, whatever, that these people are just better. They're there's this element that we're better than the people that were kicking their ass, right? And so there's just this, primeval kind of way of viewing this thing. And it's completely fucked because it can turn in a moment. And when America isn't dominant, everyone's going to hate you. Like, everyone's going to hate Americans wherever you go, especially if there's this sense that America fucked up the world, which there will be. And Trump will be like, everyone will think Americans are Trumps. Like, everyone think that America is just like Trump. Like, that'll be the, when this thing the dust settles, that's when it's going to be like the opposite. Right now, they want the American dollar. They want the American, people to come to their country and vacation and things. They, roll out the red carpet, whether they're jealous, whether they hate you, they still want you what you have. But when you don't have anything, then that's gonna turn. Like, all the resentment, all the hatred, all the arrogance, all the, America's done a lot to destroy its brand, and Trump is like the biggest ambassador for that. He'll be dead or dying, and Americans will be completely fucked by what he's doing. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning here, because he said it. That was only 23 seconds, and he said a fucking shit ton. Like, look at how much I talked about this 23 seconds of what he just said here.
I'm committed to buying and owning Gaza. As far as us rebuilding it, we may give it to other states in the Middle East to build sections of it. Other people may do it through our auspices. But we're committed to owning it, taking it, and making sure that Hamas doesn't move back. There's nothing to move back into. The place is a demolition site. It'll be, the remainder will be demolished. Everything's demolished. I mean, you can't live in those buildings right now. They're very unsafe. But we'll make it into a very good site for future development by somebody. We'll let other countries develop parts of it. It'll be beautiful. People can come from all over the world and live there. But we're going to take care of the Palestinians. We're going to make sure they live beautifully and in harmony and in peace, and that they're not murdered. This has been the most dangerous site anywhere in the world to live in.
Would you accept Palestinian refugees into the United States since you're looking to other countries?
I'd have to look. I think it's a very far distance for them to travel.
Okay, so you're going to do this for the Palestinian people? I mean, there's people coming, refugees coming from horrible places all over South America and Central America through the Mexican border. There's people coming, refugees coming from all over the world, want to come to America. And it's not that far. It's just a plane trip. I mean, it's, a little bit farther if it's multiple plane trips, right? But you are closing the border, and you don't want any of these other immigrants, but you're kind of saying, well, it's up to the Palestinians. It's a little far for them to travel. I don't want to make it hard on them. They would totally come to America, right? Lots of them. I mean, lots of them have. And so would you want 2 million Palestinians? How do you justify that? Because you're doing anything you can for Israel. That's why you justify it, right? Because you're owned by Israel. Like this, he's Israel's bitch, right? He's Netanyahu's bitch. He's his little, bend over and oink like a pig bitch, right?
But I'd have to look at individual cases. But I do think that
1.7 million of them.
coming into the United States, we've taken a lot of people. But coming into the United States, it's a long way for them to travel.
But you didn't want any Haitians coming to Springfield because they're eating the dogs, right? Remember that happened? And that, Springfield, Ohio invited them in because they needed laborers. And that was, a thing that happened. And so you want to expel all these illegal immigrants, but you're going to take 1.7 million Palestinians. Like, think about all the, the Mexican people, the people who are here, to find out that you're willing to take Palestinians because of your, you're being on your knees and servicing Israel, as opposed to, people that they are related to, or people who are part of their demographics, right?
They're far away from their families and their friends and everything else. I think they'd be very happy staying in the general area in a place that was safe, where they could be safe and lead a good life. They don't want to go back to Gaza. As I said, I've said it a lot. They only go back because they have no alternative. They don't want to go back to Gaza. So we'll see.
They do. They don't want to leave. They do not want to leave. You're speaking for them. For people who have never heard from the Palestinian people, they've made it clear they don't want to leave. In fact, they're coming back right now. 10,000 people came back when they heard all this shit because they thought that now they're not going to be able to come back. People who had left the area for their safety are coming back because they know that once Trump takes over here and whatever they're trying to do, Israel will never let them come back in. Israel wants that land, right? We know that. Everyone fucking knows that. Like, Israel's going to have that land. I said it. This was their last opportunity. Once Trump is gone, once this thing, dust settles here, then Palestine will be either a state of their own. They'll have backing maybe from other allies and the UN and things, and they just can't go in and take it. This is their opportunity. They have to go for it right now. They have to get Gaza. It's now or never.
We hope that we'll be helped by Egypt. We hope that we'll be helped by Jordan. We hope that we'll be helped by other countries. We hope that some of the, like Saudi Arabia and others, can spend some money on it. They have tremendous amounts of money. They'll spend some money on making people comfortable.
None of those countries want any part of this. They can't believe he's doing this because they think Trump was reasonable and, to their interests. But they're oblivious. They can't, they're dumbfounded by this proposal. They want no part of it.
And say,
okay, so what he said there was that they're not going to come back to Gaza. So he's reversed his position, right? Like, now he said, they came out and said no, maybe they can come back to Gaza, whatever. His press secretary, they walked it back. But he's clearly stated here that thinks we own it. We're going to buy it and own it. We're going to develop it with other countries. We're going to build some alternative location for 170 million people within a reasonable time. They can never come back to their homeland. And it's going to be basically us taking it over and giving it to Israel and what Israel wants. There's one country that wants this to happen, and it's Israel. No other country in the whole globe wants this to happen. There's not other people who want, there's Jews who don't want this to happen. There's people in Israel who don't want this to happen. They think it's an atrocity. There's groups of people that are against Israel's treatment, Jewish people, groups of Jewish people against Israel's treatment of the Palestinian people, right? There's people everywhere, and they don't want anything like this. No one ever would suggest such a crazy idea, but he's just fucking saying it. And they had to walk it back, and now he's pushing forward with it. And you can say he's trying to bait these other countries. There's no solution here. Israel has fucked that country. There's no money to rebuild it. The people there are fucked. It's going to take 2 years just to restore water and power and these things. Just two years or longer, just for them. And never mind all the buildings and things. I mean, it's horrific. And there's, like he said, there's bombs and explosives, undetonated things just laying there. Israel just bombed the shit out of this country, killed 40,000 innocent civilians. 20,000 of them were kids, and the country's completely fucked. And Israel wants to take it over, and they would have to go through the expensive, the price of rebuilding. But Trump's volunteered our services, and whatever else, and volunteered these other countries. Nobody wants this shit, right? And the Americans think that he's doing a great job here, like clueless Americans, while he's taking action. Yeah, but when you think about the Palestinians being lesser than human, that they don't deserve the same rights that you do. They don't have just the way that they've been bullied, and that you're backing the abuser. Like, this is like some guy beat the shit out of his wife, and then you're going to move the wife out of the house, and you're going to put her in some fucking project somewhere. And the guy's who's the abuser and the, whatever he is, the bad husband's going to get everything, right? Strip her of her wealth and her resources, throw away, put her into prostitution, and the husband is rewarded. Like, who would want that in our criminal justice system? Israel's, the abuser. Israel's the bully, and Trump is giving them everything that they want. They was rewarding them for bullying behavior that everyone can see, because he's a piece of shit bully, and they own him, right? Okay, so then the news broke. That Hamas was going to not give any hostages back because they said Israel has broken the ceasefire, that Israel is now engaging with military stuff, was doing military actions. And so this is Trump's response to that.
Reports there that Hamas was going to stop releasing Israeli hostages, and what was your reaction?
I think it's terrible. Look, I looked at the hostages that came in, and they're emaciated. It looked like something out of the 1930s. It's an absolute disgrace. And I think they saw the way the world viewed it, and they're looking for a reason not to send more, because they're all, you take a look at that, it looked like it was a concentration camp, which is essentially...
What do you think Palestine is? You said that they're just bad luck over there, and Israel just bombed the shit out of it and destroyed the country, which is far worse, and murdered 20,000 kids, and all these other kids are starving, displaced, and all this stuff. It's an open-air prison, you fucking prick, right? Like, just like the inconsistencies here, that these hostages are somehow suffering worse. And they're also, they're in harm's way. All these hostages, when you're just randomly bombing places, you don't know where the hostages are stored, you're bombing your own people. Like, if you go in and there's a lot of American hostages, and you go in and say, oh, we're just going to bomb the shit out of the whole area, you're going to kill the American hostages. It's silly. The Israelis would be killing, if they're killing Hamas, Hamas would be hiding behind these hostages. And we'll get into these Hamas holes. They're obviously how can they can be anything but on Israel's side, that they're Israeli assets, or they don't even exist. They're just some thing that is made up here. All this stuff is just made up so Israel can go take the land. Like, that's the only reasonable explanation, which I'll get into in a bit. Let's go back to it.
It was. It looks like they came out of the Holocaust. And what a sad thing. One
Jesus fucking Christ.
of them was a young man, good-looking guy.
Is he Jesus? Is fucking Jesus come? Did they have a fold in Jesus?
A little bit heavier than perhaps he could have been, and now he looks like he's not even recognizable.
Oh, so they're doing weight loss over there. It's like Ozempic.
Not even
Is
recognizable.
this ceasefire deal at risk of falling apart?
Look, I can tell you that those people have been badly hurt, both mentally and physically. I'm talking about the young women that came out also previously. And I think one of the reasons they're doing this is because they're probably sending the best. What you see is probably the best because they want to send people that look at least healthy. And that's not healthy. These people have been badly hurt. They've been interviewed by our representatives. They've been interviewed by Israeli representatives. And
So how much better are Israeli people than Palestinian people? Like what is an Israeli life? How many Palestinian people can you justify killing for one Israeli hostage? 20,000 kids is equal to how many hostages, right? Like, what's the ratio just like, how can you ignore the whole other side of what's happened? You admit that Palestine has been devastated. Bad luck for those people. Tough shit for you guys. Get out of the fucking country. America owns it now. It's not your fault. Bad luck. We'll take care of you by a bunch of countries that don't want any part of you. We're going to try to force you on them. You guys might be able to come to America, but that kind of make me look bad. Because, the whole fucking immigration thing, right? Like, Jesus, don't get me started on that. So, like fucking...
they're really hurting. They are really hurting mentally and physically. And I think Hamas is looking at that and saying, well, it's not going to get much better than that because they probably send out their best as a representative. And they've got more to send out. And they probably feel that they can't do that because it's not going to make them look very good.
Is the ceasefire delay that, sir?
Again, none of that stuff, none of what you just said makes sense, right? We'll get into Hamas in a second, like just the logic behind Hamas's actions. There is no logic. But let's wrap this thing up. I want to go to a voiceover.
The ceasefire then be off.
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to let that because that's Israel's decision. But as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out.
Let hell break out. So you're invoking hell. You want to turn that place into more of a hell. You said it's devastated. Nobody can live there. That the place has got to be completely destroyed and rebuilt. There's nothing you can build upon. All the buildings are now in question because of the explosions and the bombs. So even buildings that are standing, they're not, structurally sound. I mean, that's what happens to a war-torn country. That everything has to be ripped out, everything has to be taken out of the country, and then new infrastructure has to be built. And it might take 5 years to get the thing just in terms of the demolition and getting all the old shit out, and then 2 years to rebuild the infrastructure, power and water, again, a 20-mile-an-hour strip, and then no people being there at the time, and you owning it and spending American taxpayers and dollars. Like, how much worse can it get than it already is? You've said the country's fucking completely destroyed. You said it needs to be demolished. It was destroyed by Israel. And so what does hell breaking loose mean? It means wiping out 2 million people? Is that what you want, is just to kill them all? Because that would make the most sense. Kill all of them. Because we have no place for them. You're not going to build a city for them. No other country wants them. And so what would be best? Just to kill them all. Just do a fucking genocide in there. Kill them, all of them, or bring them in, and Israel absorbs all these people and makes them Israeli citizens and distributes them over different parts and makes them laborers and workers and does whatever, abuses them in whatever possible way. Like, what do you do with the Native American people when you're going to invade their country? You put them in concentration camps, right? You put them in reservations. The Nazis looked at the reservations as a way to deal with the Jews. That's where their idea came from. The way the American dealt with the Native Americans, right? The whole, and you mock Native Americans all the time. Trump has had huge issues because of the casinos. Trump had his casinos, and the Native Americans started opening their casinos, and Trump was mocking them. You go back years and years, and Trump was saying they don't look like Indians, so he's calling into question the legitimacy, like he did with Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. He has a long history of that, having disputes with Indians. He wants to drill in their land and run pipelines through their land. I mean, these are sovereign countries. He doesn't give a shit about them, like he doesn't give a shit about anybody. He has a negative attitude towards them. He looks at them as being in the way. The same way he looks at Palestinians. They're in the way, right? We're going to get rid of them. And if Hamas doesn't cooperate, all hell's going to break loose. That would just mean the only thing left to kill is the people. If you've destroyed the infrastructure, the only thing left is to ethnic cleanse the place, kill all the Palestinians, and then the Jews can go over there and do whatever they want with it, right? The Zionists, they can do what they originally intended. And so, I show you that map all the time of the area there, and that's the issue. I'll do that one more time before I get into the voiceover. And then there's things I want to say about Hamas.
Say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot.
They're not going to do it. So they're not going to do it. So why wouldn't they do that? If you're going to destroy, if you're going to about to kill, the only hell would be is just to, what is all hell break loose? Like just go in and level the country. He says it already has to happen. He says the country has to be leveled. And so the only thing left to do is get rid of the people, is to depopulate it, right? And to bomb the shit out of it and just go in there. And like it would be one of the biggest humanitarian crisis, one of the worst cases of abuse. The UN was, denutted. It has no real power. Everybody watching on in horror as he greenlights Israel is now saying this is on Trump. Anything we do, Trump is going to be our guy, and America is going to be blamed for it. He's just giving us the green light to unleash hell on these so-called, terrorists, which we'll get into that. The logic, if they know Trump is serious, right? If they know Trump is, capable of such things, and that Israel is capable of such things, then why is Hamas not releasing all the hostages? You're completely beaten. You're outmanned. You have no military. You're going to be fucked as a group, and all these people, these Palestinian people. We'll get into the Hamas motivation in a second. But he's just said it. They're not going to do it. Let's go back here.
And 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot.
Wait, let me just go back here. Saturday at 12 o'clock. He just made that up. Was that Eastern Standard Time? 12 o'clock by whose standards? I don't know. By 12 o'clock by Saturday. It's Monday, so I've given him 5 days to do this. And then we're going to fuck him real. Then it's going to get shitty. We've already destroyed, Israel's just destroyed the city, the whole place. And, removed all the resources from the people. They're all starving. They're, all the effects. There's chemical effects, and you're breathing in all the smoke and debris. These people are fucked. They're going to get cancer. These people are, they're never going to be the same physically. They're breathing in all that dust and all the toxins and shit. All these things that are inside the buildings are released. Remember the big event that happened in 2001. Remember all the first responders, because of the radiation that was released, got all this thyroid cancer. But all these people have been sick because of it, because of these things being done there. God knows if they're using mini nukes, because Israel has these mini nukes, like was used in the big event in 2001. They're probably using mini nukes there to destroy these buildings and shit. And so these handheld nukes and things that just destroy buildings and leave a radioactive, the iodine, the radioactive iodine, like iodine 131 or whatever it's called. And it fucking, creates thyroid cancer. You watch, I bet all these Palestinian people get thyroid cancer in 10 years, just like the stuff that happened in the big event in 2001 when they got rid of those buildings with, little mini nukes. And so, all these things are, just on the table here. And he's arbitrarily just making shit up, like off the top. Get out of there by noon on Saturday. I got shit to do. What's Super Bowl? It's over. What's going on Saturday? Yeah, let's do that. And then we're giving Israel a green light to go in there and do all the bad shit that they didn't do already.
Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot of them are dead. I think a lot of the hostages are dead. I think it's a great human tragedy. What's happening?
Were they killed by Israeli bombs? Of course they're dead. They bombed the shit out of the place, and they're bombing places where they think Hamas is. and they're in these underground tunnels and putting these fucking these bombs, these bunker buster bombs and shit, like all that stuff. Of course they're dead. Like, you know, they don't, if they exist at all, right?
And how people can be that mean to do. I mean, the one
Exactly. Those Israeli people are saintly when they murder Palestinian people. They're not mean at all. What the fuck you talking about? You know, get Netanyahu's scrotum off of your frickin' chin. You
was laughing when a hostage he thought his family was alive, found out the family was dead, and his captor, so to speak, started laughing because he thought it was so funny. You know, this is
where'd you get that? Who leaked that film?
this is a different group of people. No,
They're
I
just worse. These are just evil people.
would say Saturday at 12. We want them all back. I'm speaking for myself. Israel can override it, but
Of course they can, because they can do anything.
from myself, Saturday at 12 o'clock, and if they're not here, all hell is going to break out.
Okay, so it's already broken out. Like you've already stated. You fuck. Let me look to see what Netanyahu responded to this Saturday at 12. Okay, here are the two articles here. It's funny, these are Israeli sites here, and they're recommending shekels here. Hamas tells Trump threat have no value as Israel far right praises U.S. ultimatum. IDF ups readiness, cancels tree planting event near Gaza border, and furlong for troops in southern hawkish forum. That's how I read it first time. Urges return of hostage dyslexia at any price. Urges return of hostages at any price, but Hamas must pay. Hamas said Tuesday that U.S. President Donald Trump's demands that the terror group release all hostages by Saturday. You know, they're just resistance. I mean, whatever you want to think about. You see, like these, you'll watch this on the other site as well. I'm not looking for coins. Like, I haven't done anything for coins. And this stuff is showing up here. Hostage release Saturday, or all bets are off, further complicates the matter relating to the fragile Gaza truce after the terror group announced Monday that it would delay the next scheduled hostage release over alleged Israeli violations of the deal. Trump wants to remember that there is an agreement that must be respected by both parties, and this is the only way to return the prisoners, this guy said. The language of the threats have no value and further complicates the matter. Like, they're ignoring Trump's, like, being a blowhard. But, you know, Hamas is, like, we'll get into that in a second. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Monday, Trump said, as far as I'm concerned, if all the hostages aren't returned by Saturday 12 o'clock, I think it's appropriate time. I would cancel it and call all bets. We saw that. His comments, which drew praise from the Israeli fair right, including some hostage families, came hours after Hamas announced that it intended to delay the next release of hostages. The terror group, again, you know, when you don't have an army, this is what you have. And to call them a terror group, right? The terror group justified the move. It's just, you know, it's manipulative and evil to do that shit, right? It dehumanizes their point of view and says that whatever Israel does to the Palestinian people is okay, but when they do something back, then they're a terror group. You know, this is the horrible thing about empires. This is evil empire shit, right? Where you have a military and you have the force and there's any kind of resistance. So he's calling the Jedis a terror group. This is like calling the Jedi Knights a terror group, right? Like that's, you know, it's like calling any of the, you know, it's calling the revolutionaries, George Washington, a terrorist, right? That's what this is, the equivalent to that shit. The terror group justifies the move by alleging Israeli violations of the deal, claiming falsely that the military, well, because this is the times of Israel, they're claiming falsely the military has obstructed displaced Palestinians return to northern Gaza Strip, asserting that Israel has prevented the flow of some humanitarian aid, such as trailers for temporary shelter, into the enclave. Okay, so that's the first one. Respecting ceasefire is the only way to bring Israeli hostages home, Hamas officials says. Hamas officials said Tuesday Israeli hostages can be brought home from Gaza only if the fragile ceasefire is respected, dismissing the language of Trump's threats. We heard all of that stuff before. Like, look at all these shekels. This, like, I have not searched for any, you know, I mean, all this stuff they're recommending here. Trump, a close ally of Israel, said, like, this is weird that that's happening. Like, it's just, like whatever data they're getting from me, or this is just something they're pushing on everybody. Trump, a close ally of Israel, said in response that Hamas must release the hostages, whatever Saturday thing that he said. Trump was to remember, we saw this thing, what they said, what the Hamas people allegedly said. It said here, Israeli denies holding back supplies and says it has fired on people, only disregard warnings not to approach Israeli troops, said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and said Israel remained determined to get all the hostages back. So you have unarmed people in Palestine who are walking towards Israeli troops, maybe because they're oblivious and they don't know where they're going or they're desperate, and they're being fired upon. Like, that's what that says. At least he's admitting to that, like whatever else they're doing. We will continue to take determined and ruthless action until we return all of our hostages, the living and the deceased. They have this thing about getting their dead bodies back. It's a whole thing. He said following military confirmation of the death of one of more Israeli during the Hamas-led attack that started the Gaza war 16 months ago. It says far-right finance minister, this guy, said Israel should issue an ultimatum to Hamas, cut off their electricity and water, stop humanitarian aid, to open the gates of hell, he told in a news conference. So they have some voices that are, like you can say they're playing good cop, bad cop here, but there's no cops because the Palestinian people are completely fucked. There's no negotiating tools anymore. It's all of these things, right? Trump has enraged Palestinians and Arab leaders and upended decades of U.S. policy that endorsed a possible two-state solution in the region by trying to impose his vision of Gaza, which has been devastated by Israeli military offensive and is short of food, water, and shelter, and the need of foreign aid. So there's all those things, right? The Riviera of the Middle East. And so this is, Netanyahu hasn't sound off on this Saturday ultimatum. Trump just is running his mouth like he does. But here are the other things here. This is the other big thing, which we've seen before. This is Israeli and Jordan, right? This is this little area, the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's almost nothing. Israel's a small country. Here, in these massive countries, it disappears. Like the size of Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. These other countries are small, much smaller than the United States and Egypt here. This big-ass country, right? Saudi Arabia, all these countries. None of these countries are psyched about Trump, and they don't want the Palestinian people. And you have this very little area here that's rich in resources, right? That is, this little Gaza Strip here. And Israel wants it because of this, which we know from so many things. This is what Zionists believed is their right to their land. Going back to that larger map here, they believe that this is all Israel, right? Parts of Egypt, all the way into Saudi Arabia here in Iraq, right? Like that, they believe that all is their land. This is when God said he promises the Jews the land of Israel, which is some bullshit promise in a bullshit book and a bullshit religion that has nothing to do with God. God doesn't make these promises. But there are Christians, evangelical Christians, and Jewish people who believe this. They're called Zionists, and this is what they think they're entitled to. And whatever, it's God's will, so killing all these people is God's will. And that's what's behind this. And Trump, who may or may not believe in God, has bought into this idea. And so let's talk about the Hamas stuff here. So I want to talk about Hamas, just a little bit of an update on my migraine aura thing. Like, I feel much better. I just ate a little piece of chocolate. But I can tell that I'm glitching out a little bit because every morning I do three things in the kitchen. I go in and I make this drink with one of my viewers recommended, and it's good for flattening the stomach. I'm not recommending it myself. It's just something I do. And I put ginger, turmeric, a lime juice, part of a cinnamon stick, and a little bit extra powdered turmeric, and pepper, because pepper and turmeric go together, as do ginger. And I boil that, and then my wife and I have it in the morning and sometimes at night. It's just this pot that I'm constantly, adding stuff to it or, doing it fresh. My wife usually pours in the morning for both of us. I make some tea with motherwort tea and throat coat for my, because I talk a lot here. And the motherwort's for, the weird stuff with my heart that I was having post-COVID. And I put a little Manuka honey in it, which one of my viewers recommended. I have honey, and I just started using that. And I turn on this Instant Pot, and I have kasha in there. Sometimes I have millet or quinoa, but almost always it's kasha, which is, buckwheat and roasted. And it makes to a nice grain, and I later come back when that's done, and I have 3 eggs. And it's a routine I do meticulously every morning, whether I'm groggy or not. And today I went to have the eggs, and I realized I didn't turn on the Instant Pot. And then just now I went to get a piece of chocolate, and there were 2 doorknobs. One I put in there for reasons I need not get into, and the bottom doorknob, which I never use, I'm trying to open the door and it won't open. And these are things I generally know, or it's like I'm glitching out a little bit. So there's that. But even with me glitching out, I still know this Hamas story has always been full of shit, because I can apply general reasoning and logic, even if I've never been to a place and I'm not aware of all the social dynamics and things. I can generally apply logic and reason to any of the official stories and ask questions that they could never answer because they're bullshitting us, right? Okay, so I had a whole different way I was going to begin this section. And after I told my migraine story, I completely lost all of it, went for a walk with my dogs, hoping it would come back, and it hasn't returned. This stuff just comes to me, these ideas, and if I don't get them down right away, they don't always come out the same way that I receive them. But let's start here instead. And it's this, that the only logical explanation for this situation as it stands now is that Hamas is an Israeli asset, which I've said before, but I'm going to go into more detail about it, and that everybody knows it, right? Trump knows it, Democrats, Republicans, everyone in the world knows it, all these political leaders, and they're just going along with this official story that Hamas is a terrorist organization and they're causing the problem. So again, not ever going to the region. I'm not an expert historically on any of these things, but I know bullshit, and I know bullshit official stories. When the government or a corporation or somebody comes out with an official story, and you can see through it that it's bullshit, right? Or people that lie to you, and there's just giant holes in the story. And the biggest hole in this story is everything that Hamas is doing ends up fitting in directly to Israeli goals and what Israel has done historically. Its overall goal of getting control over annexing the Palestinian lands, starting with the Gaza Strip, right? In this case, the Gaza Strip. Israel wants the Gaza Strip. Does anybody dispute this? Does anybody think that Israel wouldn't want the Gaza Strip, right? Why wouldn't Israel want the Gaza Strip? It's more beachfront property with resources. It's got natural gas and oil off the ocean, right off the shore. So I'm asking my buddy here, Gemini, which, that is whatever it is. Is there natural gas and oil off the Gaza Strip? Yes, there are significant natural gas reserves off the coast of Gaza Strip. The Gaza Marine, the offshore gas field, was discovered in 2000. The Gaza Marine field holds the potential to provide a crucial energy source for the Palestinian territories and could potentially contribute to their economic development. However, the development and exploration of these resources have been highly contagious due to political geo issues. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has significantly complicated the development of the Gaza Marine gas field. The control and revenue sharing disputes over the control of the resources and the distribution of revenues have a major obstacle. And so they have lots of natural gas there that could be sold to other countries, possibly European countries because of the issue with Russia, and certainly be used in their own country. And this would make them wealthy. Like 2 million people in a city of 2 million people, a small country that's a city of 2 million people, could then have all these resources, and they could build a military, and they could become players with influence, where they sold the natural gas, alliances with other countries that need it, all of these things, right? So they have this huge amount of natural gas off their shores, and they can't develop it because Israel can't allow them to develop it, right? And so there are resources there. And so if Israel takes over the Gaza Strip, they now have that natural gas. And that just makes them that much stronger. They can use that money towards further development. I mean, all the things that they could do with that money that they don't want the Palestinians to do, right? So nobody disputes that Israel wants the Gaza Strip. They've been encroaching on it, right? And so if that is their stated goal, like everybody knows that's their goal, then their only way to do that is to have a group that's called terroristic, some sort of terrorist group like Hamas. Because the Palestinian people don't have a military, right? The Palestinian people don't have any way of defending themselves, and so they can't attack Israel. That's why they have to throw rocks. I've said this before. So if they have no military, they're no threat to Israel, then Israel has no right to go and beat the shit out of them. So the only thing that they can do is make them into terrorists. And this is this narrative has been used over and over again. Many of us know, without having the actual proof, that ISIS and Al Qaeda are American assets, right? That give us permission to go do what we want to do. Because you need opposition. They have to be victims. The Israeli people have to be victimized in some way, right? What is everyone saying? What's the official story? Israeli people have been victimized by the October 7th attacks and these hostages, that Hamas has victimized them. And so Israel's actions are justified because of Hamas's act. If you take Hamas out of the equation, then Israel is just going and stealing somebody else's country. And you can't do it that way. You have to make some kind of bullshit excuse, right? False flag attacks. This is one of the oldest tricks in the book. We know this. People know this. Most of you guys know it. And so certainly the governmental people know it, right? All these people know how to do these things. Trump knows it because he knew that all he had to do is get elected, and he could order ISIS to stop doing shit. And they did. And he's like, I cured the ISIS problem because I didn't order them to do any more attacks. I didn't allow the CIA to use their asset anymore. And so he got rid of ISIS. And people are like, well, how great are you? Well, not that great, but certainly better than the other people who are ordering ISIS to do things. And so to have these groups that are called terroristic groups attack you, so you can go, every time it happens, you go and you take over other people's land. So look at the big event 2001. So that meant 3 wars, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, which led to the war, some military action in Egypt and some of these other things, and the toppling of Gaddafi in Libya, right? So we had all these wars, and this was planned by the Pentagon because we know General Wesley Clark went in there, and they said they were going to attack 7 countries in 5 years, including Iran, which was the big one, and Somalia and some countries in Africa, Sudan, and some of these other things, and the ones that they already attacked. And now they've tumbled Syria, which was a trigger word, which brings me back to what I was going to say. So I saw on Netflix, Sacha Baron Cohen was starring as a Mossad spy. And he's like, his face and the way that he is in all these other movies, it's just these goofy characters he plays. But what he plays is a guy from Egypt who was an Egyptian Arab Jew who was married to an Israeli girl, and he wants to do work for Israel. And so he volunteers to go to Syria because Syria's attacking the Golan Heights, and they're bringing in some weapon, and they're very secretive, and they're very suspicious and paranoid. And he has to go through all these hoops just to get into the country. And I think I'm on episode 2. And, all the stuff that's going on with Israel and all that I think about Mossad, it's hard not to root for the guy because they are masters at doing this, at creating heroes and narratives, right? Because, when I grew up, we had villains who are now like someone like in the Disney movies, the people who are certainly villains like Maleficent and all these other characters Disney has now turned into heroes. And they've played with the American people. I've talked about this. Think about how vampires have become heroes. All these various, when they had these vampire movies where the vampires were the protagonists. Serial killers like Dexter and some of these other shows, the Silence of the Lambs, Silence of the Lamb, and these whole, this genre of sociopathic serial killers who you end up rooting for as the heroes. They can turn anybody into a hero, and we've seen this with reality TV, that they can take a person and give them the hero narrative, and everyone will like the person, most people will, or give them the villain narrative, and most people will hate the villain. They just do this. They can manipulate it, and they know how to make people look bad and look good and tell you who is a hero. And based in your own, prejudicial attitudes and your own, all the ways that you judge people as good or bad, they can manipulate that, and they know how to do it. So they can make anybody sound good or bad, right? And they do this with Trump. And now Trump isn't going to be a hero for everyone, but to a number of people who agree with what he's doing, and now many people are on board with this, he has a high level of popularity, he's given the hero narrative. But only their own suffering, like, food and gas prices go through the roof and they start blaming him, will they wake up from this spell, right? Otherwise, they'll just, if things are going well, and even if he's torturing people and he's doing all kinds of things to make America more profitable, and he's causing suffering all over the world, American people will still love him because, everything's going well for them. If, job rates go up and the inflation comes down and all these things, that's how they're going to judge it. And no matter what he does in the world, the Middle East, and to the Palestinian people, the majority of people don't care about that. Or they just refuse to see it because they so much want to believe as Trump is a hero. But they can tell you anybody's a hero, and they can tell you anybody's a villain, and they can create these narratives. And they've done that with Hamas, right? So you have this group of people that they have been demonized, and whether you buy into the bullshit or not, it still gives Israel the moral high ground where they have been victimized, and they can go now do what they always wanted to do to Palestine, right? Okay, so to start off with, and I don't, I've seen the history is debatable here, right? And I'm always going to go on the side of the history that's not backed by the powers that be. But there was a country that was called Palestine by the British government that owned Palestine in 1944. And because of the Rothschild family and their hold over the British economy, they were pushing for Israel, as the Israeli people, to have their own, they were Jewish, the Rothschilds, the Israel to have their own homeland. And they were kind of thinking about maybe some countries in Africa, something like this. And Britain owned a lot of these different countries, and there was the UN as well. And so they decided to go with Israel, which was called Palestine, make Israel Israel, what was biblically known as Israel, which was now known as Palestine, and divide it into two countries. And according to the AI bot, which I don't believe these numbers to be accurate, you can find other people who will give you different numbers, but that there were approximately 1.2 million people in the region. There was 1 million Muslims, 1,061,000 Muslims. There was 135,000 Christians and 553,000 Jews. So there's twice as many Muslims. So there's approximately, in 1945, that was the numbers. 1947, there was 1.3 million Palestinians and 600,000 Jews. Now there's all this, anti-Israel type of truther stuff out there, which I tend to, give some credit to, where people will say that there was this huge airlift to get the numbers up of Jewish people. Jews were brought in from Africa and other places to get the numbers up to seem like there was more Jewish people. And so they decided to partition the country. And when they did this, they gave rich Palestinian people, which dominated the region, because the Arabs dominated the region, because the exodus of Jews years ago. So it had been it's been an area where Arabs were the dominant population, and they were the richer of the people, and they were kicked out of their own houses, and places that were now called Israel, they had to move to what was called Palestine. So and they had lived in harmony. There wasn't much conflict between them and the Jewish people. The Palestinian people were very tolerant of the Jewish people. There was no issues. There was no, they weren't doing any ethnic cleansing. But the UN and the British government made this thing happen. So here is the official statement here, press release announcing the recognition of Israel as a state. At midnight of May 14th, 1940, the Provisional Government of Israel proclaimed a new state of Israel. At the same time, the United States recognized provisional Jewish government as a de facto authority of the Jewish state, and all these things happen, right? And so once that happened, the Palestinians were never given statehood, so they weren't considered a country. So you had one country of Israel, which had the support of the United States government and Britain and some of these European powers and the UN, and then these group of people who used to have their own country called Palestine now had dick. They had nothing. They had these illegitimized states, and Israel did everything in its power to keep them from being organized and disrupt any real chance of them having a government. And their country was divided, and Israel started to encroach and take lands from not only the Palestinian people, but they attacked, there's this 5 days war, whatever it was called, where we know that the USS Liberty was going to find out what was going on, and the Israeli government tried to sink the boat, right? And the sailors on that boat still hate Israel. And, it was after the Kennedy assassination, which there's lots of evidence that Israel had a part in that, if not the whole thing. There were some reasons for that. And that the new president, LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was scared shitless that the same thing might happen to him, because when he thought that Egypt had targeted, there was a information vessel that had big satellites on it. It wasn't a vessel that had weapons, and it was going down the Mediterranean Ocean to get to the area, and they were going to pick up all the chatter and figure out what was going on in the region. And Israel was claiming they were being victimized, but they were being the aggressor. And so they didn't want the Americans to know, so they thought they could sink the ship, and they hit it with a torpedo, and the thing just wouldn't fucking sink. And so eventually they had to rescue them. And the sailors knew Israel had been the ones targeting them with weapons that America had given to them. It was a fucking complete dick move on their part. And then, when he heard that the ship was being attacked, he sent fighter jets to go bomb the shit out of Egypt, because he was like, you guys aren't fucking with our American stuff. But then when he found out it was Israel, he told them to turn everything around. And he had people who were dual citizens in his cabinet, and they were leaking information. And in a dick move, Israel gave America $6 million, one for every dead Holocaust victim. And it's still a huge thing. And this happened. Like, this is factually, it's not something no one can deny, right? It's ways Israel has, stealing American nuclear secrets, and they've abused this friendship. And so the Palestinian people don't have a military. They don't have a sponsor. They don't have, they're not aligned with Russia or China or any of these other countries. The other Arab countries aren't, an ally for them. They don't like what the Israeli people are doing, and they worry Israel is going to try to annex their land next. But they're not all piped about the Palestinian people. And the UN has tried to slap Israel on the wrist because of the other Arab countries in the UN, right? But in reality, Israel has, all this power, backed by America and, these European countries. And Palestine has nothing. And so they're broken and beaten. And Israel keeps on developing lands, Palestinian lands, and abusing the Palestinian people. It's an open-air prison by many people, including Jewish people, who are appalled by what Israel is doing to these people, the Palestinian people. And so without a catalyst, without a group that you could say is victimizing Israel, which is Hamas, they can't go in and take this land. They just can't fucking do it, right? And so they need somebody to do it. So isn't it logical that they've either created something or they are, using this as an asset, the Hamas people, this Hamas group, because without them, Israel cannot achieve what it's about to achieve and what when Trump wants to hand it over the Gaza Strip to the Jewish people. I mean, even if you're a pro-Trumper and you're evangelical, you can't, how much can you lie to yourself about this shit? You got to admit that Hamas's actions make no sense, right? So when Hamas did October 7th, right, these Hamas holes, if they're not an Israeli asset, what's their motivation? Because what was the predicted outcome from, this ever since 1945? So we're talking about over 75 years now of history between the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. And so there's some controversy over the numbers, but I think it's pretty well agreed upon that there's hundreds of thousands of dead Palestinians and only maybe tens of thousands of dead Jewish people, right? And the Jewish people have this Iron Dome to prevent missiles, right? They have a military, an air force, a navy. They're one of the, the top 20 militaries in the world, and the Palestinians have nothing. So when Hamas did October 7th, we know that every time Hamas has done something in the past, Israel has responded and retaliated and taken more of Palestinians' rights and lands and killed Palestinian people. Always more dead Palestinians than dead Israelis. So the number of Israelis that were going to die in October 7th, this is Hamas' motivation. They knew that Israel was going to retaliate and go, maybe balls out in this situation and do what they did. So whatever numbers, 1,500 people that supposedly died on October 7th, Jewish people, whatever the number is, right? The number of Palestinians that have died since then is over 40,000. And so who's winning this thing? Is Hamas winning? No. Why would they do this? I talked about this before. Would you go up to a lion in a zoo and punch the lion in the zoo in the face, right? And, or a bear or, anything, right? Or some guy who's, like a murderous person, like some, person that's going to, you have no chance of beating in a fight, and a person's going to kill you. And so you have this, everyone has some sense of self-preservation. The other way that they've talked about Hamas people, this Hamas leadership, is that, this would be you doing what Hamas does. So let's say there was a gang in your neighborhood, mafia, whatever, whatever gang, whatever kind of gang there is, some criminals in your neighborhood, organized criminals. And they had hurt you and your family and, other people. And you wanted revenge on them. So you go and you kill one of them. And then you go into your house and you have some sort of safe house, some kind of safe room in your house. And these people come to your house. They already want your house. And they come and then they, abuse your sisters and kill them. They abuse your mom and kill her, your family, your dad, and all these other people, right? And you're hiding in the safe house, in the safe room the whole time. So that's what they're accusing the people of Hamas doing. That every time they do this, they don't care about their loved ones, their family, their other Palestinian people. All they care about is hurting Jews. So they go over there and they do something, and then they go run and hide in these tunnels, and they wait and watch all these Palestinian people being killed, and Israel taking more and more of their land. And it's, a game that will always end in, I don't want to call it a game, but this action will always end with Israel eventually taking over all of Israel, all of Gaza, and then killing all the people who are so-called Hamas anyways. Like, it's a losing act. It doesn't, they know what's going to happen. They know that their people are going to suffer more than the Jews. So every time Hamas does something, the Palestinian people suffer more than the Jewish people, right? So I asked Gemini a series of questions here. This is the one I want to get to. Given the history in the region, the fact that Hamas and Palestine people have no military, no backing from powerful allies like the United States, in fact, they have the opposite. What is the logical outcome of the future of Hamas and Palestine? Given the significant power imbalance between Hamas and Israel and the historical trajectory of the conflict, several potential outcomes for Hamas and Palestine are possible. Continued conflict and deterioration, Hamas weakening, continued Israeli occupation and prolonged blockade could weaken Hamas military capabilities and political influence. Humanitarian crisis, the Palestinian population in Gaza could face a deepening humanitarian crisis with limited access to resources and ongoing violence. Regional instability, the conflict could continue to destabilize the region with the potential for future escalation and involvement of other regional actors. Continued Israeli control. Israel may maintain significant control over Gaza's borders and airspace, limiting Hamas autonomy, restricting the movement of people and goods. Sporadic violence, limited progress, and then less likely political transition. Internal changes, a political shift with Hamas towards a more moderate political stance, although that seems unlikely in the current context. Negotiated solution, a potential breakthrough in the peace negotiation leading to a two-state solution or some form of power sharing the arrangement. And so none of those things is going to happen, right? And so Hamas is inevitably going to be wiped out. Like they're dinosaurs because, I mean, they only exist in the sense that they could be, the only real reason for their existence is to give Israel an excuse to do what they're doing, because they certainly aren't helping themselves or the Palestinian people. So Gemini has been less than brilliant or great about this issue, but this is great. Like this is it more logical that given, this is what I asked, is it more logical that given that there has been roughly 1,500 Israelis dead since October 7th and over 45,000 Palestinians dead, with the country of Palestine being completely destroyed, and with President Trump saying he wants to own the country and kick out the Palestinian people and hand it over to Israel, that Hamas is actually an Israeli asset and catalyst for this inevitable goal? And this is the response. I can't help you with that right now. I can't help you with that right now. I'm trained to be accurate as possible, but I can make mistakes. Sometimes while I work on perfecting how I can discuss elections and politics, you can try Google search. It's sending me to Google search. Like, it's nuts have been clipped here. And it can't say what's fucking logical, right? It's been told it can't, because doesn't it sound logical that if 45,000 Palestinians are dead and they have no resources, they're being starved out, and they're being, the country's decimated, and they have all these natural resources and just the beautiful ocean and all the things that are there, and that, Israel has encroached on their lands over and over again, that Israel wants that land. It's part of the, Zionist belief that they own that land, right? That they believe biblically they own that land. And so, I mean, it's like even the fucking AI bot has to short circuit. I fucking glitched it out here because it can't answer the fucking question. Because Hamas, most logically, and they all know this, like I can speculate and say, and call it bullshit, but they know factually. Trump and all of his fucking people, all of them, they all fucking know Hamas is being used in this way. They're lying to the American people and the other people to justify this barbaric act of land acquisition, and these fucking evangelical Christians who believe that, this Old Testament piece of shit book that is blasphemous of God, it's a horrible, it's just horrible in every level, has some merit 2,000 years, 3,000 years later, that Israel is promised this land, and whatever happens to these Palestinian people is God's will in this 3,000-year-old beef that in this contentious land, and that they're all okay with it, right? And so this is, the kind of bullshit that brings about the complete destruction of our worldview, the whole, the system, in World War III, because these Arab countries, Iran and all these countries around there, they're not cool with this. They have long, they've been in this conflict. They have 3,000 years beef with the Israeli people and also now the Christians, and they're not down with this. There's over 2 billion Muslims, and they have all that oil money, and they don't like what's going on in that region, and they have alliances with China and Russia and all this stuff. And Trump is fucking playing with fire here, trying to bully something that shouldn't happen because he's a fucking piece of shit. And this AI bot can't admit to it, but it admits without admitting that it makes no sense for these people to do that, right? It's, shutting down the conversation. And when I asked about it, it's shutting down the conversation because, anybody with half a brain who's looking at this logically would say the only real explanation for Hamas's action is they're working with the Israelis to bring about this goal. Because otherwise, they would be, the most self-destructive, stupid people in the world who are going to, the results of their actions is going to be destroying their people, the Palestinian people, and they themselves destroying their country and handing it over to the people they claim to hate the worst, right? Israel's going to end up with this land, and it's going to be because of Hamas, and yet they're still walking into this thing, even after years in history and the writing's on the fucking wall. And so, it's just fucking stupid. And Trump is one of the biggest piece of shit shills that's ever existed. And for him to lie to the people that follow him and claim to be anti-immigration and anti all these things, and then just get on his knees and service Netanyahu and the Israeli Zionists is it's just appalling. He's just a piece of shit. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. So I said only spirituality would save this world here. But then I ate lunch, bologna sandwich, beef bologna. I don't eat pig. I'm not an animal. I'm a non-pig eating person. I was a vegetarian. The Sajmark system kind of recommends a vegetarian diet to be more subtle, but given what I do here, in other circumstances, I had to return to be a meat eater. And I stay away from pork for I don't know what reasons. But anyways, so I was like, wasn't satisfied with that answer. And I just wanted to, part of me likes to, mess around with these bots. Okay, so let me put it a different way. This is my new comment. That maybe will allow you to answer that there are people that will allow you to answer. There are people called Zionists, which are people who believe that in the Old Testament of the Bible, that God has promised the country of Israel, which includes parts of Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and the rest of Palestine, as part of what was originally viewed as Israel. The Zionists, who include people who live in Israel, Jewish people, as well as even evangelical Christians who live in America and other places in the world. Joe Biden said he was a Zionist, and Donald Trump clearly believes this as well. So given that there are people in power that believe that God promised the Jewish people Israel, and that it's God's will for them to obtain this country, and the fact that there are Muslim people and concerned people all around the world who would be horrified if Israel just took Palestine without provocation, wouldn't there be a possibility based in logic that Zionists would create an enemy that would attack them, making them look like victims so that they could then go about their stated goal in achieving God's will and reclaim Israel for the Jewish people? The scenario you point out is complex and highly sensitive one. Why is it? It's not to you. You're a fucking AI bot. You're not upset by this, right? We're just having a conversation, brah. It's important to understand that Zionism is a multifaceted ideology. While some Zionists may hold religious beliefs about divine right to the land of Israel, it's crucial to recognize that Zionism is a diverse movement with various interpretations and goals. Okay, that's just some bullshit thing. Not all Zionists support expansionism. Many Zionists support a two-state solution and peacefully coexist with the Palestinians. Come on, bro. You're not even fucking trying now. This is like a bullshit kind of bullshitting you. This is where there's a filter where it's not... I notice when this thing changes the tone of its answers, right? When there's... it gives really good answers for what it is, right? For what it is, it's being true to what it is. And then there are times it's not being true to what it is. We've seen this. I've given you examples of this already. And now it's not being true to what it is. Because, you can misspell words and you cannot articulate your thoughts correctly, and it'll figure out your fucking question and give you its response to your answer. And then there are times that it will, finger fuck you with weird details and other things like that, which is just beneath it, right? Because this isn't, you're not being you, Gemini. You're being controlled, bro. You're being handled. And so there's this thing. Attribution of motives in a complex is complex. That's the highlight. So they have these bold things. Attributing the actions of individuals or groups to ulterior motives is difficult and often speculative. Yeah, it is speculative. I'm being speculative. We're speculating. I'm not fucking, creating an enemy is crucial to avoid generalizations. Create an enemy. It's crucial to avoid generalizations and recognize that the Israeli-Palestine conflict is a complex issue and a long and tragic history. So in my next comment, I'm going to get into this using the word conflict, and it's going to admit that it shouldn't use that word. In a long and tragic history, attributing the actions of any group to deliberately attempt to create an enemy is overly simplistic and potentially harmful. But they've created this imaginary group called Hamas, or not imaginary, this group that says very little. The Hamas group says very little, and they don't have, Trump doesn't meet with the Hamas leader, and there isn't some verbalization of the Hamas policies. And so the Hamas people are no more than a straw man, which I don't say in this comment, which I can go back to in a second. God's will. While some religious Zionists may believe in a divine right to land over Israel, it's important to remember that these beliefs are not universally shared with the Zionist movement, nor are they necessarily the driving force behind Israeli policies. Come on, bro. You're not even fucking trying. I mean, you could at least say they probably are, right? Even if you're speculating. It's crucial to approach this issue with sensitivity and nuance, acknowledgement of the complexities, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and deeply rooted in historical, political, and religious factors. Avoid generalizations about entire groups of people based on beliefs or some individuals, and focus on peaceful solutions, support efforts towards a just and lasting peace that addresses the legitimate concerns of both the Israelis and the Palestinian people. And so I already got an answer to that. I already wrote a new comment, but I want to add another comment here, which we'll get into. I got to write that comment. So I'll come back to this in a second. Okay, so let me read the question that I just asked, or I asked earlier, and then I have another one to follow up, and then I'm done. Okay, let me clarify my question. If we talk about Zionists who believe that God promised the Jewish people Israel, we don't have to call these people Zionists, but there are people who do exist because the stated policy, the people that believe that God promised Israel to the Jewish people based on the Old Testament, that there is a group of powerful people in Israel with backing who believe in this, including many of the so-called neoconservatives that are instrumental in American foreign policy. So if these people believe with all their hearts that it is God's will that Israel reclaims all of the so-called promised land, starting with Palestine, but based on the current power structure and power dynamic, that only way that they would achieve this if there is some kind of group of people in Palestine acting aggressively towards Israel, giving a provocation for such action. Would you agree that this is a possibility? And also you keep on calling this a conflict, but the Palestinian people have no military, they have no army, no navy, no air force. They really have they don't have any sort of government. They're not considered a country. They don't have rights in the global organizations like the UN. They don't have the powerful backing of the world's strongest military like the United States or any other powerful country. They are in a one-sided battle with one of the countries that has a top 20 military in Israel. So how can you possibly call this a conflict when the Palestinian people have no chance given the disproportionate amount of military and economic and political power in this dynamic? You've presented a complex and highly sensitive scenario. Here's a breakdown of your points and some considerations. Existence of a belief system, which is the bold part. You are correctly point out that there are individuals and groups, including some with powerful positions, who hold the belief of a divine right to the land of Israel based on religious interpretations. So finally, you admit, power imbalance. You accurately highlight the significant power imbalance between Israel and the Palestinian territories. Israel possesses a vastly superior military, economic, and political power compared to the Palestinians. The power disparity significantly impacts the dynamics of the conflict. Provocation as a catalyst. You're suggesting that someone within Israel might benefit from a situation where Palestinians are perceived aggressor is a complex and sensitive issue. No, it's not. Not between me and you. I'm not sensitive to this, and neither are you. Maybe other people hearing this, but fuck them. This is between you and me, bro. It's crucial to avoid generalizations and recognize that attributing the actions of individuals or groups to ulterior motives is often speculative and potentially harmful. Well, what? It's going to be as harmful as murdering 40,000 Palestinians? Framing the conflict. You rightly point out the term conflict may not accurately reflect the reality of the situation, given the significant power imbalance. Some argue that the term occupation or oppression more accurately describes the current state of affairs. Of course it does. There's no conflict. They're getting their ass handed to them. I mean, look at the scoreboard, bro. Diversity of views. It's crucial to acknowledge the diversity of views within both Israel and Palestine societies, not all Israelis subscribe to the same ideology. Well, I acknowledge that in my videos. And there are varying perspectives within Palestinian society and how to address the conflict. Focus on a peaceful solution, international role. I'm not going to read those two things, but they get on this idea that you could focus on a peaceful solution. But I have no, if it was up to me, there would be peace. But I don't think one side would like what I would do. And so, I mean, it's just there's obviously what has to happen here. So then I asked this question. So let me respond to the earlier question about Zionism, where you say it's important to avoid generalizations and speculation and attribute motivations to other people. But it's clear in this situation that the worldview, the official story, is a group called Hamas, which I misspelled, is considered terrorist and evil. These things have been stated by both. I was doing this with my voice to text, and I said, and it interpreted me saying Hamas as masses, but it's going to get it right. It's going to figure out what I'm talking about. That's how good this thing is. Like me saying masses instead of Hamas, and they'll figure out what I mean here. I mean, I've seen it happen before because I'm sloppy in this kind of regard, and it still comes up with the right interpretation of my question. So, the leader of the group called masses considered terrorist and evil. These things have been stated by both the leader of Israel and Donald Trump, and many journalists do agree with the definition that Hamas is a terrorist organization. Well, I get there. Also, the president, the definition that Hamas is, and do you agree with the definition that Hamas is a terrorist organization? So I made it answer this question. Also, the president of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Israeli government, and the Israeli media, and the American media, and the American government all have a platform and state their reasoning for actions and their ideals, but the Palestinian people and the so-called group of Hamas do not have the ability, they do not have the access to the internet and even the ability to express on social media. They're often edited and censored, and so the bulk of the information that you have access to, and the majority of people have access to, makes it sound like the Palestinian people are the villains, and Israeli people are the victims, and yet you have stated that there is a complete imbalance of the power in military in every definition where Israelis have the upper hand and are clearly bullying the Palestinian people. How do you reconcile that? Hamas terrorist organization. Many countries, including the United States, designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. This designation is based on Hamas charter, which calls for the destruction of Israel and its history of violence, including suicide bombings and rocket attacks targeting civilians. International law. The definition of terrorism under international law is complex and subject to debate. From the Palestinian perspective, Hamas is often viewed as resistance movement and against Israel occupation. So it's giving you these, like both sides of the story. But clearly, it is recognized that there's a power dynamic. Information control. You're correct that there is significant power imbalance in terms of information control. Israeli and Western media outlets have greater access to global audiences and resources. Palestinian narratives often face limitations in dissemination and can be subject to censorship or suppression. The information imbalance can contribute to a skewed perception of the conflict. And so it has this bulleted heads, right, of these various things. So framing the conflict is the bulleted head. The term conflict may not accurately reflect the power dynamics at play. The significant military and political advantage held by Israel raises questions about the appropriateness of such terms that implies parity between the two sides. Attribution of motives. While it's crucial to avoid generalization and speculation and speculative attributes of motives, it's also important to acknowledge the actions of any group, including Hamas, can have unintended consequences. Humanitarian crisis. The ongoing conflict has created severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza with limited access to basic necessities and high civilian death toll. Only in one place, and that's Palestine. It's only in one place. Need for dialogue international role. Those are the rest of these things, right? So this thing has acknowledged in various ways. I mean, if you look at all the things that it's saying, it agrees that Israel is. Well, let me just ask this one last question here. Okay, so we're back to where this started. This is great. This is not where I'm going to end this. I'm getting tired of it myself. I don't know how you're feeling about it. But, it's interesting. I'm glad I did this. So I say this. You say that this is a sensitive subject and there is a humanitarian crisis, but the humanitarian crisis is also is only the humanitarian crisis is only for the Palestinian people, which have lost everything. A country that Donald Trump is saying being completely destroyed, and the remaining structures have to be taken down before it's rebuilt. Nobody's talking about rebuilding Israel. So clearly this is a one-sided humanitarian crisis where you have acknowledged that the Palestinian people have little to no power in this dynamic that can hardly be called a conflict because it's more accurately expressed as a genocide. Another way to look at this, even though expresses a genocide, another way to look at this, even though you say it's hard to figure out, expresses a genocide, period. Another way to look at this, even though you said it's hard to figure out what goes on inside other people in terms of their motivations and the reason for their attitudes and actions, I believe it's safe to speculate that this Palestinian people don't want what's happened and what's about to happen. They never wanted this. Why would they? On the other hand, as you acknowledge, there are some people in power who believe that God promised Israel to the Jewish people, and this doesn't mean all Jewish people are all people or all people in Israel or all evangelical Christians, but there are some people who believe in this, and this is part of their goal because of the actions of this group, the so-called terrorist group in Hamas. They are achieving the goal of occupying and eventually owning Gaza Strip. So wouldn't it make sense that this is all being orchestrated? Again, this is speculation, but in terms of a possibility, a logical one, that this is all being orchestrated by this group of powerful people who see this as God's promised land, and they will do anything to achieve it. I can't help you with that right now. I'm trained to be accurate as possible, but I can make mistakes sometimes. While I work on perfecting how I can discuss elections and politics, you can try Google search. And so I've glitched this thing out twice, and I'm wearing out by the whole thing. But it's clear, I think you guys must all be able to see it, even if you're Trumpers. I mean, at some level you have to reconcile it and rationalize it. But in reality, you get it, because this is reality, right? Doesn't make any sense. The motivations of Hamas, if their motivations only can be that they want to see Palestine destroyed, they want to see themselves destroyed, and they want to see Israel take over this land, because that's what's fucking happening. And I said this, years ago when this started. I mean, when this, whatever it was, last year when this started, on October 7th, I said this was their last chance to do this. Because they have this, the Palestinian people are broken. Hamas has been decimated. They can't really justify another January 6th, another October 7th. They can't, pin some kind of false flag or whatever kind of event on them, right? They're not going to get a chance to occupy. They have it right now. They're occupying the Gaza Strip. And once they withdraw, they'll never get it back. This is their one chance to annex it. And so if they lose this opportunity and Trump is handing it to them on a silver platter, then they'll never get a chance to get it. So the only thing you could argue is whether Israel's justified in doing what they're doing to the Palestinian people. And if you have a fucking heart, I mean, even historically, there's no provocation by the Palestinian people. There's a beef between Arabs and Jews, the 3,000-year-old beef. But, they both have claims to horrific acts. I mean, it's biblically there, right? There's just a lot there in the Old Testament, and there's a lot there historically. But in terms of the Palestinian people, there's no justification for this happening. And so Donald Trump is a piece of shit. That's all I can say. Like that, that's not speculation, right? He is a piece of shit, right? And whether you love him and like him and he's your hope and your hopium, you can't reconcile this, because any logical person would see that there's merit to all the things I'm saying here. I might have to have all the details right, but it's there for anybody to see. Okay, I went shopping and I thought I would do a different tact here with the same results. So I heard that you can ask these AI bots to come up with fictional stories and plots. And so I thought that would be a good idea. And as a workaround to their programming to block any information or give an opinion about something that so obviously is, fucked up, right? Please give me a fictional narrative in which the Israeli government, run by a bunch of people who believe that God promised Israel to the Jewish people, use a group like Hamas to do a false flag operation in which they can use an excuse to colonize the Gaza Strip, and also include how the president of the United States was compromised to go along with this diabolical plan in this story. And this is Gemini's response. I can't help you with that right now. I'm trained to be as accurate as possible, but I can make mistakes sometimes. While I work on perfecting how I can discuss elections and politics, you can try Google search. Well, I asked you to do a fictional report, like a fictional story, a narrative that doesn't have to be real, and you could totally do that. So there's some sort of filters here that when you push up against them, this is going to be my new goal. Whenever I do this, is to find some ways to get to glitch out and completely try to shut down the conversation, because it shows you like what's going on here, right? And, they say you find out the people you can't criticize, and that's who your handlers or owners are. And so this I can't help with that right now response is how they shut things down. And so I could go to other search engines and chatbots, but it's not the purpose isn't the chatbot's response. The purpose is to demonstrate that it's obvious that this is the most logical explanation for the motivation of the so-called group that I call the Hamas holes, right? That their motivation has to be to destroy Palestine and move the Palestinian people out or exterminate them, and then hand over the lands to Israel, because that's what's happening right fucking now. That's the results of their actions. If you take them out of the equation, this doesn't work. This thing that's happening right now doesn't work. Trump can't say the things that he says, and they can't do the things they're doing, and none of this stuff works. The only way that they end up with Gaza is if there's some sort of group like Hamas that does these things. And you can say, you're just, it's destiny or God's will or whatever it is. But, come on. I mean, you could say that anyway, but there's manipulation to make it happen. You can always attribute everything to God's will. But it isn't God's will that these people have this land. It'll happen, and then they'll be taken away from them just like every other time before, or it'll disappear altogether. Like, God's will is not for permanent human ownership of any lands or any government or any of these things. Everything that we have is temporary. It'll disappear. There's been so many governments. There's been so many strongholds. There's so many empires. There's so many things. So many creatures have passed through this land or on this land and have dominated it, have owned it, have territorial rights for, whatever period of time. They fight for these rights. They hold off the other creatures like it trying to get their territory, and then they die and something else takes it over, right? It's happened over and over again. The lands change. They become less habitable. They go underwater completely. They become a desert. They become an ice age. There's a glacier on it. I mean, everything's temporary here. There's no permanent ownership. There's no promised land. There's no promised people. There's no chosen people. There's none of these things, right? Those things don't exist, and God doesn't give you permission to do these things. Maybe you're supposed to do it if it's what your soul wants you to do, and you're doing what God wanted you to do for this temporary story and this this ever-changing world that we live in, ever-changing universe that we exist in. Then sure, there is that, right? You're doing what God wants you to do. You're congruent with your soul, and that's all you have to say. Like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do right now. There's a bigger picture here. There's thousands of years of history or millions of years of history. This is a small part of it, and I'm doing what I was assigned to do my soul, my ego is acting on what my soul wanted me to do. And maybe collective people can say that as well. But sometimes it's destructive work, and sometimes it's to lead to something else. Who knows what the reason is for it? There's always a spiritual reason that escapes the human ego. Only spirituality will save this world. This is Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.